Welcome, folks. We decided to let the early ones in, so that Jess and Tiffany might have a chance to say hello to friends and meet new friends. But we're delighted to be able to do this. We've had a pretty overwhelming response, which says to me that there's a need out in the field for these types of conversations to happen. I suppose I should change my name so you know that this is Celia Hughes talking. So maybe while we're waiting, if you could, those of you who wish to, could put into the chat if you're a describer or a dancer or an interested citizen. That might give us an idea of who we've got in the audience for both Jess and Tiffany. Great, we have a theater director, a describer with some dance background, artistic director of a dance company, former audio describer, former dancer, interested citizen, audio describer, planning to be an audio describer, another describer, a filmmaker and describer. We have another soon-to-be describer, hopeful. So lots of describers, and then the Michigan Arts Council ADA coordinator, another teaching artist for Michigan Arts Access, describer from Houston, describer, an educator. Lots of good people here. We're excited about this. Some people I know, a lot of people I don't know. So we are recording this, and what we plan to do is edit it, make sure it has good captions, and upload it to the ArtSpark Texas YouTube site, where we will then send the link out to everyone, and you can view it on our YouTube site. And I'm thinking, for those of you, once we get started, if you wouldn't mind turning your camera off, I think that will help, because we've got Jess coming in from Berlin, Germany, and we've got Tiffany coming in from a boat in the San Francisco Bay. So if we could help them out a little bit with our trying to make the feed to them as clean as possible, that would help. Alrighty, as we wait for a few more people to arrive, we'll get started in just a minute or two, because Jess and Tiffany have a lot of good information to share, and we want to give them every possible moment. Alrighty. Well, I think, and this was everybody that was here on time, that we should go ahead and we're going to get started. Hi, my name is Celia Hughes. I'm the executive director of ArtSpark Texas in Austin, Texas. I am a describer. I've been a describer for over 20 years. Thrilled to be able to host this event. ArtSpark had plans to host both Jeff and Tiffany in April of this year for a week-long residency, and we discovered that people are still not ready to come back for in-person week-long residencies, and so we had to cancel our plans, which was very disappointing to me and to everyone. So delighted that we're able to bring both Tiffany and Jess to you to talk about their process. And as I said in the email, we hope this to be the first of several conversations about audio description for dance and audio description in general. But we're thrilled that Tiffany and Jess are here to launch this obviously very important conversation, judging by the number of people that are coming in. We're thrilled. We asked for people to put their questions in the chat box. April Sullivan, who is with me, who is also an audio describer and has been a describer for many, many years, is helping me to manage this today, and she'll be also helping to manage the questions in the chat box. We're not sure we're going to have time to get to questions because Jess and Tiffany have a lot to share, and but we will take your questions, and if we have time, we will begin to share them. But I will also use those questions to come up with topics for future conversations. And April we will have a poll at the end of this, a quick 2-question poll, asking you for your zip code and asking for topic ideas. So if there is a topic that is burning for you in terms of audio description, either put it in the chat for us now or put it on the poll. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to Jess and Tiffany. I'm going to ask them first to introduce themselves and who they're with, and just a little bit about them. So take it away.
Thank you very, very much. Tiffany, do you want to start?
Sure. Hi everybody. My name is Tiffany Taylor. I'm a blind, disabled advising and co-authoring on audio description.
Right. Are you done, Tiffany? You're muted now. Or did you get muted? I'm Jess Curtis. I'll just jump in there. I'm a 61-year-old white guy with a shock of messy white hair on the top of my head. I wear glasses and have a t-shirt with our company logo there, Gravity Access Services. And yeah, I'm a dancer, choreographer, performer, and who began doing audio description back in 2015, actually. A couple of my early works as a choreographer included just some audio description that was built into the work as we were working and trying to make the audio scores contribute to accessibility of the work. And that work I started in 2005, but really addressing audio description as a directly what came out of a workshop, a residency that I did with my collaborator, one of my main collaborators, Claire Cunningham, who's quite a activist, professional disabled artist from Glasgow, Scotland. And for a duet that Claire and I made together, we got some funding from the Unlimited Festival in London, who was a commissioner of the work, to do a 2-week residency addressing access at the place in London. And we had a bunch of blind performers and directors and audio describers, as well as deaf sign language interpreters and deaf actors and directors came into the studio. And we wanted to figure out what's best practice in this moment. This was in 2015. And also what are the exciting new innovations people are doing and how to do this for dance and interdisciplinary performance, which is kind of our work is more multidisciplinary. So we worked with Maria Oshodi from Extant Theatre in London and Chloe Phillips, who's a theatre director in London, and a really fantastic audio describer, Emma Jane McHenry from Glasgow. And we built an embedded audio description for the piece that we've been touring since then. That piece is called The Way You Look at Me Tonight. And in the process, we bought some equipment to be able to tour with it, because in just sort of surveying the field outside of the UK, it became clear that in Berlin, where I work a lot, and in San Francisco, where I work, where I'm also based, very few live performances were being audio described. And so we realized, oh, we better have our own equipment when we travel. And then once we started traveling with that equipment, it occurred to me, wait, this is not happening either in Berlin or San Francisco very much. maybe with my company Gravity, we could begin a program and start offering audio description to other people. And we did a kind of a pilot project in 2018 where we did 3 performances in Berlin for the Tanz im August Festival and 3 or 4 performances in San Francisco. And in the last, and that was well received. We got a little bit of funding, and as we started doing more, last year, I think we did over 35 performances around Germany with the German team, part of our team. And in San Francisco, we did something like, or in the Bay Area and in the US, we did about 45 audio descriptions for a variety of events, live, online, videos, and a number of different things. So it's kind of exploded in a good way. I'm honored and a little intimidated that so many of you are here. I was kind of also expecting when Celia asked if we were going to do this, that there would be like maybe 10 people, and that there are so many of you, and so many of you who have experience as audio describers. I want to really just out myself as, we're making it up as we go along. I have done some really good work, and I think also in my work as a choreographer, Tiffany and I worked together and have made 3 pieces together with a larger team of performers, and we're researching all the time the full range of what it is to really embed access from the beginning of a project into the project, and what is it also to provide useful and to make a performance accessible that somebody wasn't doing that, so that we can come in and help make something accessible for blind and low vision audiences, even if an artist didn't start from that place. So I'll try not to be too
No, it's great. I wanted to jump in to assure you, Jess, and this is Celia. I'm a white woman with long brown hair. I like to say it's brown, it's actually gray. But I want to say, Jess, that so much of audio description is improv, and we are, and especially around dance. So you are doing it, and you are doing it gathering respect from people, and which is why we're all really wanting to come and learn from you, because again, dance is such an interesting medium. So Jess, we're delighted that you're here, and thrilled that there is such an interest in the field to learn more and to become more informed describers of the field. And Tiffany, you did get muted, so I'm not sure if you have unmuted yourself.
I'm here.
Great.
I should be unmuted. Yes. Hello.
Terrific. Okay, well, so the first question, did you have anything you wanted to add, Tiffany, to your introduction? Because I think you got muted while you were introducing yourself.
Yes. Okay.
It's okay.
Yeah, I could just say quickly, I have a background in theater and have been doing description. Yeah, I've been doing description with Jess, I think, since about 2018 with Gravity.
Okay, terrific. Well, let's just go ahead,
if
Jess.
I can, I would just love, because I think Tiffany really embodies our goals as a company and as artists. That so I met Tiffany because Tiffany came because Claire and I had audio description for our show, which was, I think, the first audio described show at Counterpulse in the small theater where we presented. Tiffany came with a group from Lighthouse for the Blind in San Francisco and saw the show, experienced the show, listened to the audio description and the haptic tour, the touch tour that we did beforehand. And then a couple of months later, Tiffany came back to a contact improvisation workshop, and then did a performance workshop, joined a performance workshop that summer. And then the following year in 2017, I invited Tiffany to perform in my next work. And since then, Tiffany and I were working on our third, the third piece that Tiffany's been an actor, a performer in for my company Gravity, and is now also obviously an expert and leader in turning other people onto audio description, and is really an important, invaluable part of our process. So just that, yeah, from that's been really important, that arc with Tiffany.
Yeah, and that was one of the things that really excited me about working with you and Tiffany, is the partnership of bringing in blind and low visioned partners to participate in the creation of the description. I think that's absolutely vital, and so that's what I was excited about.
Celia, there's a comment in the chat just from Alexis to Jess, thanking you for being human, humble, and bringing grace and gratitude to the work.
Thank you.
All righty. So now that you're humble, Jess, I'm going to ask you. So for both of you, when you're starting out to develop a description for a dance, what are the first things that you do, and why are they the first things?
So, yeah, I would just say our process is not really that different for a dance or a play. We do also a lot of theater and different kinds of performance events. We're also, we don't script work in general. And so we have a pretty simple say what you see kind of format. I want to acknowledge also, we also did a workshop with Joel Snyder, just kind of wanting to acknowledge his work in the field. And after we had done this work in London, so I've learned some stuff from Joel, and also yeah, appreciate his pioneering in the field. But we yeah, we get some information about the piece, but we mostly go and observe once. And Tiffany can talk about when we're co-authoring, like the last piece that we did, Tiffany and I attend together the show, and I'll do kind of an ad hoc quick description, filling in blanks so that, or Tiffany can ask me questions. We often just sit close by each other, and then we'll have a discussion after watching the piece once about what are strategies for describing, where are there holes in the piece, or in the information that's already available from the piece live on stage. And then the next step is then we'll meet with the artist or the artist representative. It really varies depending on the scale of a production, whether it's the choreographer of a small dance company or the assistant of Helgi Thomason, the director of San Francisco Ballet. Helgi didn't meet with us, but his rehearsal captain came and met, and because there are always questions about how the artist wants things to be represented. Oh, I should say before that, we send out what we call a preliminary artist questionnaire that asks a representative of the artist or the performers themselves to write self-descriptions. So like shortish 50-word, 25-word self-descriptions, because we want to describe people how they want to be described. And those descriptions might be a different description for the actor than for the actual character. So we get that information up front, and if they can identify any objects or culturally specific names of musical instruments or costumes or anything. So we have some vocabulary to work with as we go to the first preview. And then after the preview, we'll schedule a talk with somebody to ask further questions based on our preview. Tiffany and I have a sorry, I'm getting a little distracted by the chat that's popping up. And that gives me makes it hard for me to focus. So I think I've removed that now. Yeah, that Tiffany and I discuss strategies for that, and when we talk to the artist, we'll discuss options for what we call a haptic access tour, which is traditionally called often a touch tour. But I like to call it a haptic access tour because because I did a PhD in perception, and I got to get some use out of those 5 years of studying and writing. But I honestly, I feel for me it's really important because it occurs to me working with a number of my blind collaborators have reported that walking through the space is as important as touching the hem of a costume, and feeling the space, and the full bodied experience of the space is really informative. And haptic, if you're not familiar, haptic refers to all the senses that we feel. So kinesthetics and as well as touch. So we call that tour the Haptic Access Tour. So we develop with the artist or with their usually it's about we try to plan 20 minutes that will happen just before the show, before the house opens, with the blind and low vision attendees, and then we sit down and via wireless, our portable wireless headset mics, transmitters, we then do an audio description of saying basically identifying what we see as people are doing it. There, specifically for dance, I would say another groovy way to talk about it is to say the preparation actually began with all of our describers, with the 20 years of training as movement artists that they have all done, so that all of the describers we work with are performers who have body-based performance practices and have a lot of vocabulary already quite accessible to their physical experience and their experience of watching a dance. So they're not having to always think of the word when somebody raises their arm or their leg, or so I say that's kind of key to how we work. And to give kudos also to one of my teachers and director. I mean, I use work out of my practice of choreography and improvisation. That one of my primary director teachers was Sarah Shelton Mann, and she had us do this exercise all the time that was just saying what you're doing. And when I teach audio description, we do a lot of activities, and also when I teach also blind and low vision dance classes, we do a lot of moving through the space, saying what we're doing. Just like I raise my hands above my head, I put my hands on my chest, I slap my cheeks. Very simple, just getting people more familiar with having that connection between the physical and the verbal, really making that connection really strong, so that you're not having to think in between. So that's a lot of the training we do as describers, to be able to just link that really quickly. Tiffany, that was me talking a lot. What do you want to fill in?
It's okay. Yeah, this is Tiffany, and I would just add that I think a lot of it also has to do with language, and some people I think were asking in the chat about technical versus maybe more common terminology for describing things, and I think that's where I can help with the co-authoring of giving feedback too, of, as Jess mentioned, where are the holes, where are things that are missing that I'm missing as a blind person in watching a show, but also what is the background? Many blind and disabled people have not been welcome as performers or into performance spaces. So if it's a ballet, what ballet terminology does the describer have, and do they use that or not, is really a balance of like, who is your audience? If the audience doesn't know much ballet terms, we're not necessarily going to use all ballet technical terminology because it's there. So that is kind of really a balance of figuring that out. And some of the audience we get to know also before the haptic tour. So if that's possible to have that tour and meet the people using the headsets, that can also maybe give a better clue to the describer of kind of saying, okay, this person actually has some background, or this person really wants to know the story, this person really wants to know emotion, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I have what I jokingly refer to as my 5 French word rule, that you're not allowed to use more than 5 French words when you're describing a dance, and that you have to cover them all. You have to make sure everybody knows those 5 French words when you're talking to people in the haptic tour beforehand. So if that's pirouette, pas de deux, relevé, and jeté, turn, or whatever it is, making sure everyone understands, as opposed, for many people, it's much more useful to just say, and jumps in the air and turns around. And so those things, I mean, yeah, some dance techniques have really standard vocabulary, but again, yes, it's different if you're describing for a bunch of people who have lost their vision and perhaps have an experience of having danced, then you can use those terms. But also we one of our venues that we did a number of shows at this year's Bay Area Children's Theater, and children's like 9-year-olds don't have a really different vocabulary than adults. So we're always kind of figuring out what is useful vocabulary for the exact audience that we're describing for.
I think some folks are already adopting your 5 French term or 5 French word rule. I'm seeing a lot of support for that in the chat. And so I just want to clarify then that you have 20 dancers in your company. Is that, and that they're all trained as describers, or they all help you with the
No.
description process? Okay.
The program, Gravity Access Services, is the program of there's
Right.
a nonprofit. There's my performance company is just called Gravity, or Jess Curtis / Gravity. And we're having our own working at identifying the different aspects of the work we do. Gravity Access Services is our access services program, and there's a lot of overlap. So we right now in San Francisco, we have 6 describers, 7 including me. I still do descriptions when I have time, and those are all people with performance practices. And I think not all of them have actually performed in my work, but or in the company's work, but 4 of them are regular performers in projects. And like our new piece that's called Into the Dark that Tiffany's coming to Berlin in September with 3 other Americans, and we're working with 2 German performers. So there's 6 people on stage in that piece. So it's a contemporary dance situation where it's project to project, but actually for the last 3 pieces, pretty much the same team have been in each of the last since 2017. All the pieces Tiffany's been part of.
Terrific. Great.
But I
So-
do think it's an important thing to just underline. Yes, the artistic practice really informs our audio description practice, and vice versa. Like our piece Into the Dark that we're working on right now, 40 minutes of it are in complete darkness like you've never experienced in a theater, because it's mostly illegal, without a lot of extra technicians around the side ready to pull down the coverings on the exit signs. And that's really been super interesting. We've had dark sections in the last 2 pieces that are to just mobilize everybody's senses other than vision in the work. So our knowledge of audio description and our practices of self-description are really informing the work my dance performance company makes, as well as vice versa. Those performers are some of our best describers, so that's really fun.
That's exciting. I love that idea, and hope that you plan to also perform that in the United States after its Berlin premiere.
Yeah,
That's really exciting.
we played 2 weeks in San Francisco in November, and if anybody out there has a theater, we're really happy to come. Yeah.
Okay, so Jess Curtis / Gravity. So both Tiffany and Jess, what experiences in your performance practice you've touched on this a little bit, but what experiences led you to develop audio description as part of your services and part of your performance practice, really?
Tiff, you want to go?
Yeah, I would say this, Tiffany. I would say that for me, I grew up always being with low vision, and I have a degree, a bachelor's degree in theater, but had never seen an audio described performance, had never met any other disabled performers, had never done a dance class because they weren't made accessible to me. And so when I moved to California, I met Jess through his production with Claire that he mentioned, where they had audio description and Braille and all these accessible features. That really got me saying like, oh, this is actually available. And then, Jess offered those, started doing this, the audio description services, as he mentioned. And that's kind of was my start into really actually saying, this is important and this is needed. And then I come in also and try to make connections in the blind community. What do blind people even want to see? Do you want to see modern dance? Do you want to see more theater? Do you want more access to ballet? What is it that you want to see? And that's kind of how it started for me, because I really liked theater and dance and performance, and then became more involved in actually dancing and performing myself, but then also knowing there is an interest for audio description because I'm interested and because other people in the community are interested. And I was really surprised that even in the San Francisco Bay Area, it wasn't really happening as much as I would have thought. So my start was a lot of it was contributed to by Gravity and Jess, but also just by my own interest and knowing that this could be something that could be offered and should.
Yep. So I think she must have hit a wave in the bay. So Tiffany will come back in a moment, but Jess, what about you?
Like I said, I'm a bit of a geek and around science and perception in the theater. I wrote a PhD around in performance studies, focusing really on how our senses structure the way we experience dance in particular. And so that's always been a kind of interest to me. And as a director, I've always kind of broken down things into like, okay, how is the volume of this affecting this, and directing people's attention in different ways. So I feel like it's quite embedded in how I think about making performance. And then, yeah, really, I'd say the leadership of Claire and folks from the disability arts community in the UK, but have really, because I've had the opportunity to work in the UK, where audio description is way more prevalent than my understanding of it in the US, and a lot of different festivals that I've been at, Buzzcut and Unlimited and different, there's just a lot of audio description is really required. And so those things kind of came together. And again, I like to talk and I like to dance, and talking about what I'm doing while I'm dancing is one of my favorite things to do. And so they kind of worked well together. And then when Claire said, okay, by the way, we have this residency in London, we're going to build an audio description into our show. And we had such a really fun time doing that, and really thinking from the get-go, how does this work, and how is the audio description going to interact with the score? And the recorded score that everyone hears is totally influenced out of audio descriptive practices. Like there's several sections where there's one section I love in particular where Claire and I, in the recorded sound that comes through the speakers for everyone, we're each describing either what we're feeling in a given moment or what we're doing in a given moment. And then also our philosophical collaborator, a brilliant philosopher named Alva Noe, who has collaborated on that piece. His score was to just ask questions about what we were doing as he was watching us roll across the floor. And those three, then our composer wove those three tracks over a musical track, and they make I think, a really lovely poem about each of our experience of what we're doing and Alva's questions about what we're doing. And for the blind and low vision audience, Emma Jane on the headsets has a synced recording that is filling in the gaps that the sighted audience are using to make sense of the things we were saying. So that really just excited me, and I feel really, indebted and grateful. I've learned so much from Claire just about thinking through access on every level as we're making work together. And then, it's been super interesting. And I think at a certain point, having the equipment and having some know-how about doing it, and seeing that both in Berlin and San Francisco, where I sort of bounced back and forth, that it really wasn't happening at that point, I was like, well, our equipment's just sitting in my closet. Like, let's see if we can, make some work accessible. And it really took off. I mean, artists, especially I would say in the underground, or the free scene, the independent artists of Berlin and San Francisco really picked it up really quickly. I think have been pioneers, even way more quickly than some of the big institutions. And like I said, we did like 35 or 40 performances around Germany last year, and over 40, or I forget the number, but a lot around the Bay Area and the US over the last year. And now some of the bigger, so anyway, that all has been super exciting. Feel like I'm all of a sudden kind of in charge of a startup as opposed to being a choreographer. And I'm like, wait, I don't know if I know how to do this part of it. So we've had some help from a couple of foundations. The Ford Foundation gave us some support the last 2 years, to help get some more administration and stuff on board. And that's been helpful, but it's still, I feel like we're at capacity all the time. I think I saw Michael, our managing directors, out there in the crowd today. So we're just figuring it out one step at a time as we go along.
So I do want to spend a little more time on this, and Tiffany, if you're unmuted, if you have anything you want to add before I move on to one question that I see in the chat that I think would be good.
I
Tiffany,
think
did you
I would
want to
just
add
say, I
anything?
know that
Yeah.
I cut out, I think briefly, basically my summary of my introduction was, as a blind person having a background in theater and never seeing anything accessible, never attending accessible classes, never having audio description, and then meeting Jess, and through his productions, that's how, my interest started. And I'm also figuring it out as well, talking to other blind people and figuring out what do we even want. And that's kind of where, this all is us also figuring it out as we go.
Yeah, that's terrific. So the question here comes in from Maria. She said, I understand that an AD script is not required and much is improvised with a combo of technical and layperson's terms. However, knowledge of the choreographer's creative intent and some movement descriptions would seem instrumental in AD for dance. And so is there a choreographer's note or summary of the story being told or shared pre-performance, expressing intent, arc of the piece, storyline, anything like that?
I'll jump in there, and Tiffany. So I would say that our process always includes talk, and we like to ask for at least a half an hour. And if a choreographer will speak to us for an hour, I'm really happy to just go, okay, here's what I see. And how to bring, like, what do you intend? What do you, and there's a kind of a fine line here. I feel like my job is not to explain the dance to anybody. If you're not explaining it to the sighted audience, then I'm not. I want my blind and low vision listeners to have the same wonderful experience of mystery and bafflement that you're providing for the sighted audience. But I also want to be in resonance with, when I'm watching something. I recall watching a piece where there was a gesture that the dancers kept doing, where they raised their arms above their head and gently swayed from side to side. And I said, in my interview, when talking to the choreographer, I'm like, you do that a lot. Do you have a name for that? Like, is there a name that I know from making dances, there's a name for a movement that comes out of the rehearsal process, and they were oh, the seaweed arms. And I was like, yeah, okay, the seaweed arms. I'm like, can I use that word to describe them, because that's really useful, and maybe we'll include it in the haptic access tour beforehand, and let the listeners actually do the movement so they can feel it. And then when I refer to the seaweed arms, they'll have both a felt sense of it and an explanation. And the choreographer was like, that sounds great. And yes, you can use that language, because actually the whole piece has a whole maritime fluidity about it, that's really a metaphor we're working with in thinking about the movement. And that then helps me as a describer to go, okay, so I can talk about flow and currents and reservoirs of energy or whatever. Like, I can go with that metaphor. I like to use what I call a language palette, where I'll list as I'm listening or watching a piece, I'll scribble some notes about different kinds of language that I think I can use, and run through that with the choreographer to make sure it kind of resonates with them, and fine tune it. And then, so I have notes. It's not, and that I'm prepared. I prepare my improvisation of the sort of extemporaneous description that I do. So hopefully it does, in fact, really resonate with what the choreographer is doing. But I can also report some choreographers think they're doing something that I can't see, and I, in those instances, sometimes have to say, okay, that's great. You should write a program note. You should write an accessible program note in an accessible PDF program that you put out, and explain that to the listener. But I can only talk about what I'm actually seeing, the visual information. And yeah, so there's a bit of a balance there. I mean, we want to support the intention of the artist, and also not overstep our bounds in terms of interpreting or explaining.
Yeah, that is one of the fine lines that we discuss all the time as describers. And we have a question in the chat that's reaches out to Tiffany. It's from Emily. It says, I've heard debates about whether the language when describing for dance should stay objective or get interpretive. And I'm wondering if you can address that. Conversation discusses how dance isn't always able to be felt the same way if you just tell someone where someone moves to and with what gesture. Do you have some thoughts about that, Tiffany?
Yes.
You might have gotten muted again. All right, well, we wait for Tiffany to get back on again and answer that. You've been talking a little bit, so, Jess, and I'm getting the sense from you that this is a really value add to the work that you're doing now. This work of describing and the haptic tours and all of that. So how do you think that this is adding to the advancement of the appreciation of dance in particular for people who are blind or have low vision?
I feel, let me see, how is it adding to? I feel like, I mean, Tiffany's just a great example of somebody who.
Just to let you know, Tiffany's dropped off for a second, so sure, you can say nice things about her, but she won't hear them.
No, I was only going to say nice things, but that, yeah, of that, by coming to having provided access for blind and low vision folks, Tiffany had an experience of dance and performance that was different than something she had had before, that led her into taking a class and actually participating, and then mobilizing her experience as a theater artist in the and now, yeah, beginning, so that the doing of it then informs also her her appreciation of dancing that she attends now as well. So I think this whole, the access to training, access to the art, access to being able to become artist and envision herself as an artist. I mean, those are always for me, the most exciting and inspirational moments are when when a young dancer or a young person who hasn't actually experienced much dance says, oh, I just saw Axis dance or I just heard this description and now I know I could do that too. And I want to go take a class, or I want to. So I think that's because when I think of my background, it's like I remember seeing the Oakland Ballet when I was in high school up in Chico, California, and the Oakland Ballet came through it. And ballet did not end up being my chosen aesthetic, but I was blown away and I went, I'm gonna go do that. And that really led me to creating work. So yeah, I
Right.
think that.
Well, Tiffany's joined us again, so as soon as she gets in, we'll be able to bring her back in. But I wanted to say a question that I, of course, have totally forgotten. Nathan Ruggles has a question regarding performers and self-description. But before we get to that, I wanted to ask you, you've mentioned several times that that you find the environment in Berlin and in England to be different, maybe more welcoming to description than what you're finding here in the United States. And I know I speak for myself here, saying that I don't always have access to the director, the choreographer, the actors prior to. There isn't the understanding on the point of the production company yet of the value of that. And so I was wondering, did you run into that same sort of a confusion, resistance when you first started doing this? I mean, it seems like in England, it's very much their practice, that this is part of their natural practice. But I'm wondering here if we have some advice for some describers out there as to how they might gain access that you have gotten to choreographers and to dancers ahead of time.
Yeah, I would say it's always different. I say to all of our describers, still 80% of what we're doing is education, because for the vast majority of shows that we do still, it's most artists' first time they've had their show described. So we try to be really clear with either the venues it's the best when we get to work directly with an artist and an artist has engaged us to do the work. They've said, I want my work to be accessible. And then they're really down with doing what is necessary. When we say, oh, this would be great, let us come see it, schedule an hour with you to talk about it after we see it, and then go on. And when it's an institution or we often get booked by a festival to do some descriptions for a festival, and they'll often say, well, we can afford 3 audio descriptions, which one should we choose? And I always say the most important thing is that the artists want to be described and want to be part of the process, and if they don't, I would rather not. There's no point in pulling teeth with an art, because it takes time. It interrupts the pre-show warm-up for the show to do a haptic tour. So we try to stay out of the way, but also to give people information. We're still fine-tuning our process as a company for when somebody asks us, says, oh yeah, I just heard about this thing, audio description, can you come and do it at my show? We try to, from the very onset, go, here's what that would mean, here's how it would affect your production rhythm, here's how it would affect your publicity. If you're not actually investing time in publicizing it or making connections with blind and low vision community, you may be just ticking a box. Maybe think about, to do it effectively, it requires an investment on the part of your organization on multiple different levels. And so when that's upfront from the get-go, people sign on for it, it's much better. But if some festival director thought it was a groovy idea to have audio description and then told 3 international artists, oh, there's going to be an audio describer at your show, and then they're like, and that's going to take an extra hour before I go on, and that's going to, then it's, yeah, that's always going to happen. But and the more information you give people up front, the better, in my experience.
Thank you. That's really, really helpful advice. And Tiffany, I believe you're back on with us. Let me see if I can find you.
I am.
Terrific. So you were
I am
talking
here.
to, you were talking
Yes.
to us a little bit. I think you heard the question that was posed to you by Maria in terms of, or maybe not Maria's, anyways, about technical terms in dance and layman's terms and all. So
Yes.
you were in the middle of trying to give us your thoughts on that when you hit a wave.
Yeah. I think it's really just a balance. Like, honestly, there's not like one correct answer that I can give. I always say err on the side of, maybe assuming, like, if using more basic terminology, then it's also just more accessible for everyone. So that's kind of often what I prefer. You can have verbs, adjectives, you can have very descriptive instead of just very kind of static, dry language, but it still can be accessible.
Okay, great. Thank you very much.
I'd love to jump in and
yeah,
just to say, Georgina Klieg, who also has worked with us and advised us a lot. If anybody doesn't know her book, More Than Meets the Eye, what blindness brings to art, she's amazing. And she's advised us over the years several times. And she talks about this balance of like the objective versus the somewhat interpretive. But, she's like, I was describing something, an interaction once, and I said, she touched her arm tenderly. And she said, that's great. Like, I want some direct access to your experience of the emotion that may or may not be a completely objective description, but it's more interesting to me than she touched her arm with 10 pounds per square inch of pressure in each finger, and she's like, if you see it as tender, I want to hear how it's affecting you. That's much more interesting to me.
So Jess, could you give us her name and the name of her book again?
Yeah, Georgina Klieg, or Klieg, Kleege.
Okay.
And her book is called More Than Meets the Eye, What
great.
Blindness Brings to Art.
Terrific. Thank you. Thank you
There's
so
a whole
much.
chapter on audio description in there that's really great.
Excellent. So we are maybe going to drop that poll in now. We have a 2-question poll asking for people's zip codes and for topic questions. For topics for the next discussions, I've been taking notes on things that people are asking for. I will give Jess and Tiffany the last words here in a minute. But this has been really, really enlightening for me. I could talk to you guys for another 2 hours. I'm sure that people could also. We've had a lot of good questions come through. I wanted to say to Nathan that our next conversation will be in August with Krishna Washburn and Kayla, and I am blanking on her last name. They are going to be talking about self-description. So stay tuned for that. I think we're going to definitely do one on describing of mixed ability dancers. When Jeff brought up access and that, I think we could definitely have a very good conversation. Someone asked if there were terminology for mixed ability dance. I think we could certainly put together, if you've got ideas of who we might want to invite to speak, that would also be really helpful. But I'm going to leave the poll open for just a few minutes. People are still responding. And so Jess and Tiffany, if you were going to leave us with some last words about what you're up to. We know you've got a great premiere coming up in Berlin, but any other suggestions for describers and dancers out there who want to make their practice and their description more accessible to people who are blind and low vision. If you've got any last words of advice, that would be great.
I would just jump in really quickly and say that to that last question, the self-descriptions that we do, asking people how they want to be described and how they want to describe their mobility equipment is, we always defer to how people like being described. And that's, I think, really key. Yeah, I mean, this feels so short. I wish we had another, like, I can hang out for another hour if that's useful to anybody. I don't know what's possible here, but because there's so much to say, but yeah, we're all in it, and I think I'd like to think all of you are allies, and we're all trying to figure it out. And I think it's great to have this opportunity to share what we're doing with other folks, with all of y'all. And I look forward to hearing. There are a lot of questions in the chat I'd love to respond to, and so maybe another time.
Tiffany, if you've got some last words, that would be really nice.
I'm here. Thank you
Okay.
so much. Yeah, I'm happy to do that as well. So I just encourage people, keep asking questions, push the envelope, connect with the disabled and blind communities, and just always strive for more, and, challenge the standards of what's out there and see what happens.
Thank you so much. We will have again another conversation like this in early August, and hope to host bi-monthly conversations through the end of the year, at least, if not longer.